What do toxic people fear? In writing characters or trying to generally understand people, we usually think in terms of their desires. What do they want? But there is another way to think about the motivations that drive people, and that is, what do they fear? Avoiding a negative can be as motivating as moving toward a positive. For this video, I will be drawing on the work of Bill Eddy, and specifically his book, 5 Types of People Who Can Ruin Your Life. This book is about people with personality disorders, specifically people who are high conflict and have personality disorders. But Eddy also does something interesting. He describes what people with these pathologies are actually afraid of, and that can usually explain the majority of their behavior. This is a channel about human nature and writing. For the writers out there, as you watch this video, I want you to start to think about how extreme people with extreme fears can make some of the best characters. One disclaimer, I am not a trained psychologist, and this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Personality disordered people are people too. They have a mental illness, they are suffering, and they are deserving of our empathy. But because of their exaggerated, extreme, and often destructive behavior, they're a great window into human nature generally. First, I want to talk about narcissist. This is from the DSM-5, the standard textbook that psychiatrists and psychologists use to diagnose people and their mental illnesses. Let's take a look at the diagnostic criteria for these species of person. Generally, narcissists are characterized as having a pervasive pattern of grandiosity, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy. But Eddy proposes that narcissists are driven by one central fear: having their shame exposed to the world. I'm not going to do a deep dive on shame, as I already did one in this video, but the example I used there, and an example that I think really resonates, is our current president, Donald Trump. His shame, which is rooted deep in his childhood and under the demands of a difficult father, is so fragile that he refuses to admit any mistakes, errors, or failures of any kind. Next up on our list are people with borderline personality disorder. These people, as you can see, show a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships. They also have what psychologists call identity disturbance, an unstable self-image or sense of self, and they are very impulsive. One way this manifests in their behavior is they will become very intimate from their perspective with a friend or potential boyfriend or girlfriend very quickly, putting them on a pedestal as the greatest person they've ever met. Then, in the flip of a switch, they will devalue that same person and treat them like their greatest enemy. A great example of this in fiction is a woman named Alex Forrest in the movie Fatal Attraction. She has a fling with a married man, Dan Gallagher, and after he breaks it off, she becomes extremely dangerous, stalking him and his family, and ultimately culminating in the famous boiling rabbit scene. What drives this behavior, according to Bill Eddy? Well, people with borderline personality disorder are most driven by their fear of abandonment. Next, we have histrionic personality disorder. The DSM says they are defined by a pervasive pattern of excessive emotionality and attention-seeking. What brings all this behavior and diagnoses together? Their single fear: being ignored. A possible example of this in fiction would be Blanche DuBois from Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. Her dramatic, over-the-top attention-seeking drives the famous character Stanley completely nuts. Tennessee Williams shows us how some of these personality disorders are really tragic things to have. Not all of them need to be villains, and in fact, Blanche DuBois has a profoundly sad life, which makes her very vulnerable, and she's ultimately victimized by Stanley because of it. At the end of the play, Stanley sexually assaults her, and she has a mental breakdown because of it, becoming almost completely catatonic. As she's finally hospitalized and being led away, she utters the poignant and unforgettable line, "I've always depended on the kindness of strangers." Next, we have antisocial personality disorder, which is synonymous with psychopathy or sociopathy. This personality disorder is marked by a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others. These are the villains of life and literature. And one of my favorite examples is Tom Ripley from Patricia Highsmith's The Talented Mr. Ripley. We first meet Ripley as a small-time fraudster, but by the end of the first book, we learn he's capable of much worse. He murders the wealthy and charming Dickie Greenleaf and soon becomes the ultimate identity thief by taking over his entire life. As a side note, I recommend Patricia Highsmith if you want to understand the inner psychology of people with this disorder. You'll find as you read these books that despite their evil and atrocious acts, they never actually think of themselves as the bad guy. So what's their greatest fear? Eddy says that it's being controlled, which perhaps explains why they want to control and manipulate others and their environment. Finally, paranoid personality disorder. This disorder is pretty straightforward, and just like it sounds, it's a pervasive distrust and suspiciousness of others, such that their motives are interpreted as malevolent. The example I'm going to use is not quite perfect, and that's the play by William Shakespeare, Othello. Although Othello doesn't really have this disorder and is the victim of a sociopath or antisocial person himself, this is the best articulation of a paranoid, jealous, and envious mind that I think the world has ever seen. It does show how destructive paranoia can actually be. So what is the greatest fear of someone with paranoid personality disorder? It is, according to Eddy, being betrayed. Othello also demonstrates one of the ubiquitous tragedies of personality disorders, that all of these people and many of these characters end up manifesting their greatest fears. Someone with borderline personality disorder is so afraid of being abandoned that they'll act in ways that make people ultimately abandon them. Histrionics are so afraid of being ignored that their cries for attention make people just want to ignore them. Antisocial personality disorders don't want to be controlled, yet their actions outside the law often land them in jail, where their life becomes all about being controlled. And paranoid people are so paranoid they're about to be betrayed, maybe they will be once people lose loyalty to this very difficult personality type. And finally, narcissists are so fragile and their shame is so close to the surface that all their compensation becomes transparent once you get to know them and see who they really are. If you're writing a character, you can find this section on my character sheet, where you can decide whether one of your main characters has one of these disorders and be reminded of their greatest fear. There's a link in the description if you would like to download it. Check out my other videos as part of my series on the blank page protocol for more insights into how to write psychologically realistic characters. Please like and subscribe, and remember, if you'd like to reach out to me and talk anything story, you can email me at the email in my bio.